Okay.
All right.
Has everyone had a look at the agenda? Are we okay to approve it?
Yep.
Yeah.
Just adding Natasha's written report to the existing item.
Yes. Adoption from minutes from March 8th meeting. Is everybody okay with the minutes as written?
Yep.
Me too. Do we have any public comments? No.
No.
Updates. Ferry Advisory Committee, FAC update, general BC Ferries discussion. Tyler Davenport. Yeah, so there are minutes for the meeting that are available. I thought I would go through a couple of the topics that were gone over, because I think BC Ferries does write the minutes a little bit to the favor of items they wish to pursue and items they don't.
Sorry, Tyler. I did look for, I went online and looked for the BC Ferries fact minutes to put them on the agenda,
Yeah,
but
can't
couldn't
find them
any
yet.
recent ones. Yeah, maybe we can talk offline about that.
Yeah, it could be that they're not up. I mean, that's why I shared them with the public when I got them, is because they weren't showing up on the website fast enough.
Okay.
But yeah, we can make sure that they're there, and if they're not, I'll follow up with BC Ferries.
Thank you.
So the ferry refit we're now into, it was a little bit annoying that they were pretty much resigned to not using the upper decks right before we got to the refit, when a year ago when they were proposing the Cumberland, they were saying that they were going to be able to use the decks and that there'd basically be no reduction in capacity, but it's still better than the Queen of Bowen. And the only real thing we're expecting is that maybe they'll actually fix the hand dryers this time. They've promised to, but I'm not holding out hope. The summer traffic concerns was another bit of a disappointing conversation. We are getting, so summer traffic concerns being the peak travel in the summer that totally swamped the ferry and caused lots of grief. We are potentially getting a new larger ship, what was it, 2038 off memory, after a terminal upgrade in 2035. They haven't said what size that would be. But when it came to dealing with kind of the things that are affecting Bowen, they said they were open to ideas about how to accommodate growth, but they're not actively planning for anything other than a slightly larger ferry when it gets replaced. So they're not opposed to doing something, but it sounds like they were fairly clear that they are not kind of responsible for the sole option of transportation to Bowen, and that I think the term the vice president of communications used were that they are not the only game in town, and that somebody else could provide service to Bowen. So I want to talk that a little bit later in the agenda. But the only real suggestion that came out of that was more marshalling. So that is something that would need to be suggested by the municipality to BC Ferries, like additional marshalling days, and they're open to potentially, matching funding for those additional days.
Oh, Tyler, if I can interrupt there, that's unfortunate that I heard them say that. I thought, okay, that's encouraging, but if it means that council has to do that, it would be really nice if we could make a recommendation to council to do that. But
well, I guess there's still some time to, or I guess is the budget being worked on now, or that was just the metro?
Oh, no, that's just the metro one. And this isn't such a huge item, but it is something. But the idea of cost sharing is great, that they verbally agreed to that anyway. So I guess I guess we should just pass this back to Natasha to say, or Steph, to put this on the agenda for when we have a full meeting, because we need to make this recommendation to council. Or we could make it informally. Steph?
Well,
I don't know.
If Natasha were, if it's within Natasha's work plan to do a report to council regarding ferry marshalling, she could include in her report a synopsis of this discussion.
Yep, I could do that.
Okay.
And
But
then
we
I
can't
mean,
direct staff with, we can't tell
no,
them
I
to-
know you can't. Yeah. But just kind of taking a couple steps back, can someone kind of give me just an overall history on the ferry marshalling? Because I know, like, when I first started, it was somewhat of a contentious issue, but maybe just like.
Yeah, it was, I don't know, Tyler, do you, I mean, I have just a general, I don't remember the details exactly, but when did we first bring in that we would share it? Maybe, I don't know. There was limited, BC Ferries was willing to help support with limited sharing the cost of ferry marshalling on the most difficult days in the summer.
Okay.
And, you know, we then figured, and I don't remember the number, maybe Tyler remembers how many days it is. But so the discussion at the committee meeting would be to increase that number of days, because there were clearly a whole lot of days when people were really confused this summer.
Okay.
Yeah, and there were some other things discussed, such as BC Ferries passing out information to tourists coming across, like how to use the lineup, the fact that they don't need to buy a ticket, some of the comments that have come up multiple times. So there was some promising talk, but not a lot of action items on those fronts. So I can follow up with BC Ferries mid-winter and see if they are going to go ahead with any of that.
On that information, Tyler, so back before I was on council, when I was on BIMTAC, we did produce something like that, I seem to remember, and they did hand it out in the summer. Or
I can find that and share it.
yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
They also noted there was some changing, there is some traffic growth and the fact that we were hitting passenger count on weekends, as in hitting our 400 person passenger limit on weekend sailings from heavy walk-on traffic. And those are the major points I have for the summer traffic concerns, but there was they didn't seem to be really aware of what happens at the end of the lineup when it's overloaded. They don't have visibility on the top of the lineup, like as in their staff can't see it. So they really have no awareness about what's happening at the end of their marshalling area or our marshalling area. And they won't be sending staff up there. So kind of everything past the washroom is just a black box to them. They don't see it. They don't know about it. It's not on their radar to fix.
They don't have any intention of ever even having any understanding of what, is that what you're saying?
They're not refusing to try and find solutions.
Right.
But they're a very large organization with very kind of strict bounds on what their mandate is, which comes from the province. And some of our biggest issues don't fall within their mandate. So I want to come back to this as new business, but I think that some of the planning is actually probably best taken up by BIMTAC and maybe the long-term planning for Bowen, about us self-advocating for these things to the province if need be, that we do have, potential transportation issues coming if there isn't a long-term plan. So yeah, I think that there might be some work to do there. Communication wise, they have an app in beta testing, but nobody from the Bowen FAC was invited to check it out. So we're a little bit left out there. Commercial traffic, we've been asked if there was any ability to get priority loading for commercial traffic for suppliers coming to Bowen. And they basically responded that no, not at this point. And I forgot his name all of a sudden, but the representative from the province, basically because this is like a public service, the whole topic of priority loading is a bit contentious across the whole BC Ferries network. So they're not saying not ever, but not now is the current answer. Student travel, we suggested that there might be a better way for the students to be counted rather than filling in a paper board. And in the meeting, they seemed receptive to using like a dedicated compass card or something like that to track the students. But there was no commitment in the minutes to actually do that. So that might be something we could continue to push for. It'd be a small win, but it seems like doable. So continue with that one. They did respond to the concerns about the 320 versus 330 sailing quite quickly. That came up while the agenda was being discussed for the meeting, and they had resolved it by the time the meeting happened 10 days later. So I think they get some credit for realizing that needed to be fixed quickly. The Bowen terminal, I can't remember when it was originally planned to be upgraded. I think it was essentially right now, but that's been delayed. And then there was some discontent expressed with the size of the solution, that it wasn't enough, and that we needed an interim solution. So BC Ferries may be willing to provide additional temporary facilities, like maybe a porta potty or something like that, down at the terminal until we get a refit, if we think it's needed. So if that's something we wanted to push for, there may be some temporary expansion of facilities possible. And then the new vessel procurement is also out in 2038, I think. But no specifics discussed at that point. So those are the major things I thought were lacking a little bit in the minutes, but there is more covered in the minutes that I expect they've released, but they may not have. Any questions? No.
I just have more of a, a general comment just about the compass update. I think that's actually a huge step forward if they are planning on doing something similar to that, because then it could open up the potential for, innovation of actually having Bowen Islanders use a tab card as opposed to having to get a, ticket and be there for the 10-minute cutoff, which is very frustrating for a lot of us.
The 10-minute cutoff was discussed.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing that came from that, I thought, was that the decision seemed to be kind of in the hands of the terminal manager, and it was coming from a safety standpoint, or at least that was the explanation given, is that he felt that allowing people to rush would increase running or non-safe travel through the terminal. And that was the reason it couldn't be done.
Right.
In my head, though, I was thinking that, that may be the end of this conversation, but I think if you could convince them that this, like, clearly they're only seeing very small modifications on what currently exists. Like, I think if you re-envisioned the terminal as David and many others have been hoping for, where you're focusing more on the the user experience and not just repainting existing infrastructure, you could come up with something more like a C-bus where the tickets were sold closer to the ferry, or maybe
Right.
I've got the names mixed up now. Our experience cards could act like a tap and go
As a compass card, yeah, exactly.
as a compass card, and move that to the closer to where the ferry was actually boarded. So
For sure.
there may be room in that conversation long term to demonstrate that, you know, if safety is the only reason you are building in these extra waiting periods that really add up over a commuter's year, maybe you should rethink it on a bigger scale, and when you redo your terminal, not place the ticket agents 200 meters away.
I'm also curious as to whether or not they've tried, you know, a pilot study of rejigging it to 5 minutes and seeing whether or not there were safety concerns that arose from that. So
I thought the argument was a bit more of a perceived safety concern
Right.
than like there's always going to be safety issues
yeah,
in
like
a
I
terminal that
understand that
size.
for sure.
But my anecdotal point was that when I buy my ticket and then I go out into the terminal because I had to be there so early, I now have time to waste, and I go and take the kids for a walk, and then we see that ferry coming, we run from the other side of Horseshoe Bay in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And that 10-minute delay doesn't stop us at
For
all
sure.
from
There's exactly
blasting full speed through crowds and picking up one kid to run faster. So I didn't really buy it, but I understood the point. I just think that what we're asking for, or what we need to ask for, is a rethinking on a bigger scale, not just if everything stays the same, get rid of the 10 minutes. Maybe it's, why don't we work towards a goal of eliminating the 10 minutes through whatever changes are needed over whatever time span is needed to implement them.
Right.
Yeah, I can add a little bit here. So on 5 minutes, originally, so this would be back around 20 years ago, I guess, or maybe even a bit longer, we were outraged because they announced a 5-minute rule, and that was before there was any rule whatsoever. And we were all thought, that's absurd, 5-minute rule, oh my goodness, it's terrible. And then they changed it to 10-minute rule. And, you know, every committee I've been on, we've argued for, 15, 20 years, whatever, I've argued about the 10-minute rule, and they, talk about safety or this and that and inventing. So, I'm not very hopeful. They just, no, they won't change it. And I think Tyler's right. It has to be bigger changes, and it has to be the way the terminal is designed so that foot passengers, people who are traveling on buses, are given precedence rather than cars. And the trouble is the way, the way my understanding is that the BC Ferry's mandate is to increase the number of car traffic. It's all about cars. It's all about, the suburban models of 1950s, prettied up a little bit, put a little bit of lipstick on the pig sort of thing.
There is a narrative change, though, that seemed to happen this summer when they changed their CEO.
Yeah.
So, and that's coming a little bit, it seems, from the provincial government. So I think it's, do I think it's going to change? No, but if there's a time to push or even just keep nudging, I'd say that now seems like a time to keep nudging, like keep reminding them that they're telling us that it's about connections and integration and all this stuff, and just keep pointing out where you've got this blatant non-integration, non-seamless standard model that you keep refusing to budge on. And maybe one day something will change. I don't know.
I think, Tyler, you're right about the provincial government. I mean, actually, Mark Collins, we got to know Mark Collins in earlier days, and he's a pretty good guy. Quite like him. But anyway, the province has decided that there's something wrong here, because, the summer was a disaster. And so they're relooking at things. And to me, one of the interesting things that came out of that meeting was the guy from BC Transportation, the ministry, which was not the BC Ferries ministry, the Transportation ministry, and that they'd done a study of foot passenger service, and they said it was positive. Bowen and for Gibson's. And so I asked for it then, and he said no. I asked again at UBCM to his boss. I forget the guy's name. I've got it in my notes. And they didn't fess up at the time. So I sent them a letter after we got back from UBCM, and I haven't heard an answer to that. But to me, a foot passenger service that goes directly from Bowen to downtown would be like a real one, not little boats, but a big boat, and have to have a proper couple of boats in case you hit a log and stuff like that. And that would just save. That would work so well for Bowen commuters. And one of the critical things to me is what it might do also for this park issue, because if we hit the 400 capacity for people coming to Bowen last year, well, there certainly would with a park. And so from a Metro Vancouver's perspective, that won't work for them, and it won't work for us. And so, pushing for this foot passenger service seems to me a real opportunity, and using this potential park as a wedge point, as a hinge point, a way to go to the province and say, hey, province, if BC Ferries doesn't want to do this, maybe it's TransLink, maybe it's another body, I don't know who it is, but it's a different kind of service. It's a foot passenger service from where people are to where they want to go, rather than to a suburban location.
And if the destination is the new park, then shouldn't the foot passenger ferry be closer to that park?
Well, it could be. That's a possibility. It could be down at Seymour Landing or something like that. Yeah, that's another. Some people are talking about that. It's true. It's possible. But there would also, if it is for the park, if it is just a Snug Cove, or even if it's in Seymour Bay, you'd have to have a shuttle service, and Metro's talking about that. So, yeah.
Okay, well, I think I'll let's move on from this one for now, and let Natasha give the staff update.
Yeah.
Sure. Thank you. So I don't have a formal presentation to coincide with the staff report, but my kind of overarching goal is to go over the agenda items with the hopes of encouraging ongoing dialogue. So I welcome questions and comments. So please feel free to interrupt me at any time. So first up, we have the school transit partnerships, or the off-island school planning. If folks recall, we had two concerned parents come to TAC requesting support pertaining to overcrowding issues and the lack of bus and ferry schedule coordination for Bowen high schoolers. Initially, there was talk about trying to get the school to rearrange, and by school, particularly Rockbridge, to rearrange their bell schedule. And I had initially connected with West Van School District, but after some discussions, it became clear that it was going to be easier to move forward with requesting a bus service rescheduling. I was able to connect with TransLink, and after many discussions, they figured out that there was funding to include a supplementary trip on Thursdays and Tuesdays to accommodate the overcrowding concern. And the reason I'm bringing it up as an update is because it became effective this September, so at the beginning of the school year. I'm hoping to have a follow-up meeting with TransLink at the end of the year, just to touch base to see how things are going so far. I also heard back from the parents about another issue pertaining to the ferry scheduling, and they didn't mention anything about the bus service, so I'm hoping everything is going smoothly so far, but I'll reach out to them at the end of the year as well for feedback. So before I move on to the next item, any questions or comments there?
No, that sounds like a fantastic outcome for your work there. Thank you.
Yeah, hopefully. Yeah. Okay. So next up, this is actually pertaining to the traffic calming study or policy, but the item specifically is the speed reduction in the transportation plan. So given kind of Emma left prior to me being hired, there seemed to have been, kind of like this institutional knowledge that was lost, specifically pertaining to the traffic calming application. which falls more under the public works realm, and I'll speak to that in a bit. But we recently had, or the municipality had, someone call bylaw services about a traffic related concern in White Sales, whereby I ended up getting involved. And long story short, I'm sure some of you might remember, but there was a traffic calming application request, I believe that was submitted back in December of 2020, which was, oh, okay. Yeah, we can talk about this. But I believe it was kind of held up because staff were not able to retrieve the data from the traffic speed feedback sign. I haven't received kind of like a formal update from Public Works, but I'm actually looking now into an alternative sign. So I would have to go through kind of funding, the funding piece there. But I'm hoping to bring that back to the community, and maybe Wendy, you can speak to it so that we can move forward with an evaluation to determine the appropriate traffic calming measures.
Like just by being here, living here,
yeah.
that thing they put in always had a black plastic cover on it. Like it looked like,
like it never was opened.
It was never even functional.
Oh,
sat there for a couple of years and nothing.
Okay.
I don't think it was ever working.
Right. Yeah, because it's apparently at the yard now. Doug, our bylaw service officer, bless him, he went to the yard and tried to take a look at it, but I think he came to the same conclusion that it was.
I spoke to Emma before she left.
Okay.
And she said they were having trouble knowing how it worked, basically. Nobody knew how to make it work, was her answer.
Right. Okay.
So.
Okay. Yeah, because I've reached out, they're called Trafficom, and they have a support line, and I've reached out to them. I still haven't heard anything back, but it might be because it's been a couple of years since maybe we've connected with them. But I'm thinking, if I don't hear back from them, I mean, I'm not the most, I feel like if Doug can't figure out, I don't think I would be able to figure out. I'm happy to maybe take a look. But alternatively, it might be more efficient from a timeline perspective to look into an alternative traffic speed sign.
So would you do that on your own then, Natasha?
I mean, technically, I would ask for the support with Public Works because it's like a roads and traffic issue. So, but I just, after learning more about the traffic calming application, I just thought it would be important to bring up some kind of note about it.
Yeah, I know it is a big issue. There's another fellow on White Sales that's actually running with it again. And yeah, it's not going to go away. Like people who live around here are really, really upset.
Right.
About what's happened in our street.
So in terms of context, like, is it just like, can you kind of give me a quick update, not to put you on the spot or anything about White Sales? But like when you say things that have happened.
I would say before Cape Roger Curtis got developed, it was
so it's a subdivision.
It kind of, it was just for the people who lived here. And then Cape Roger Curtis opened up and the traffic started, of course, all the building, all the trucks.
Right.
It became an endless thing. And now it's just, there's so many more people going there.
Right.
It's just, and it's kind of a sloped road going down.
Yep.
So as you come around the corner, you just naturally go faster. I understand people going fast because sometimes, oh my God, I find myself going fast too, and I have to make myself slow down. There's a lot more little kids on our street. So there's a lot more parents that are worried about a kid getting hit. And like, you could be standing up on the road, just having a conversation, and we're telling people like slow
down. Yeah.
Like literally they're flying through there at 60. And it's just, it can't keep going on that way. And the entire community is for some sort of traffic calming strategy, whatever it looks like. We're open to ideas.
Okay, that's really helpful. Thanks, Wendy.
Anyway, that's the background of.
Is this Trafficom unit an expensive thing that we had to buy?
That's the thing. I haven't been able to kind of pinpoint how much it was and whether, I'm assuming there were grants attached to it, but from you know, I don't think they are cheap, but
I'm wondering if this is a spot to leverage volunteer power. Like if there's a manual that needs to be read and a thing played with, like
there's a manual.
like is that a BIMTAC task? Like we have a couple people who might be able to help. I guess I'm
Tyler wants
thinking
to
if
do it.
if this is one of those things that you don't actually have time for, and it's going to just sit there because nobody has the time to figure out how to do it, that maybe we could either get BIMTAC to do it or even go to the public and enlist a tech person who's familiar with electronics to get this working. Just a thought, looking for
That sounds
places
very-
to actually make use of volunteer power.
Yeah, sounds very Bowen, like, you know, just get the community involved to get things
Right.
going.
If that's where it's sitting, like if we can't get it working and we don't have time, staff time to play with it.
I mean, why don't let's wait maybe another week or two. I'm, you know, hoping that Trafficom responds, and then if not, we could move forward. I don't want to like pressure the community into doing something if they, you know, don't have the time. But if you want to put it out to volunteers, well, I mean, I think that's a great idea.
Well, I don't know where this traffic counter, whatever this post was,
Yeah.
where it came from, but you would think it would come with some sort of instruction.
There's definitely a manual. I've seen the manual.
Yeah. And
Well,
so,
well, I'll volunteer to read through the manual and see
Okay.
if I think there's anything I can do if we need that.
Okay. I mean, that would be awesome. Yeah. Another set of eyes. I think that would be really appreciative.
Okay.
Okay. Right. So next up we have cycling promotion. So this was actually more pertinent to the original meeting date because there was a bike to school week. But again, because there was no overlap with Emma, I kind of want to take a few minutes to ask whether or not in the past, like, did BIMTAC engage in any cycling promotional campaigns such as like Bike to Work Week or Bike to School
So
Week?
Illy did do, I think, can't remember who else was involved, but for sure Illy was involved and
Yeah.
quite involved. And they had the sign out and whatnot, but there was a bit of a negative feedback from at least one of the locations. And I think the feeling at the end of that participation was to maybe hold off a bit and only be involved when the police were willing to also be involved.
Right.
So there was a bit of a safety concern last time.
Okay. Yeah, I was hoping to touch base with Ely before she went on a cruise, but I'll circle back with her when she's
well,
back
I was
home.
involved in one of those times where we were trying to educate the public about safe cycling on the street. And there was a policeman present,
Okay.
but it was a couple of years ago. I was pre-COVID.
Go ahead,
Right.
David.
Yeah, was that with the big banner?
Yeah,
yeah.
There's a thing on the road.
Yeah, that we put, yeah.
I think it really upset drivers.
Mm,
So I think from what I remember is that there was a
What's
period where the RCMP weren't there yet or had already left. And without their presence and having kids and volunteers on the road slowing down traffic, there was a hostile, maybe not over, I can't remember how severe it was, but I just remember that there was some hostility. And so the takeaway was that if we do it again, we're only doing it when the RCMP are there and maybe not a bunch of kids.
right.
Like maybe it's more of a RCMP assisted and a couple of volunteers, not a large pedestrian presence and a lack of authority.
Yeah, makes sense.
Okay. So there's plenty of time. I mean, next year is our I think it's in May, and then following fall. So I'll connect with the RCMP
If we
and
get
go
the
from there.
cross island path built, half the population of Bowen can get there on their own safely.
Yep, they sure can. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so next up, I'll quickly go over an update on the electric vehicle charging stations. So as a reminder, this stations were set up with a gradual fee rate of $2 an hour for the first 2 hours, and then $3 an hour for the remaining hour. They became operational in May of this year. And since then, the municipality has actually collected approximately $1,000 in revenue from 347 charging sessions, with many folks actually staying the full 3 hours. So this is pretty promising news, especially in terms of usage. Granted, these were the summer months, so perhaps we'll see a decrease in the winter, but considering for the first 4.5 months, 347 charging sessions have created $1,000. That's good numbers. Those are good numbers.
Mhm.
I guess the goal though was to hopefully be revenue neutral or positive, but also to provide like encouragement of electric vehicle adoption. So I guess I think I was expecting less usage at those rates, so I think I was a bit wrong. But I guess I would think that our goal should still be maximal usage and not necessarily maximal revenue.
Right. I think in terms of the revenue, it's more like if we ever want to buy future EV stations, for example, for the community center or for other locations. So
yeah, no, I for sure think it's, I mean, also the public's acceptance of the whole program, it's important to be revenue positive if we can. But I think like as far as tracking metrics, it would be interesting to know how many sessions per day that was, like how much of the standard business day was this thing used. Because like if I take that 1370 kilowatt hours and divide it by 179 for the top one, that's only like 7 kilowatt hours, I think, roughly. Yeah, 7 kilowatt hours ish for a session, which is not very much charge. That's like a limp home amount of capacity for somebody coming from the other side.
right, okay.
So that means probably very few or nobody, I guess we're limited to 3 hours, so nobody's getting a full charge.
Yeah.
So if residents who are in some of the rental units or places on island where they don't have a place to charge at home could use this in the evenings, and we could increase like the total usage of it. I think that would be like a long-term goal, to open usage to benefit of people who couldn't adopt an EV without it.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Tyler. I mean, we could change it so that after a certain time, when all activities in the cove are over, sort of thing, it could be much more than 3 hours.
Yeah, or a break, like no time limit and a break even charge rate or something. Like,
I mean, I think there are people who are using it after, the library hours, and there are people definitely who are using it more than 3 hours. Like I'm happy to share the breakdown as well, if you're curious.
Yeah, I'm not, I mean, I guess I just am trying to make sure that when we only meet every 6 months or talk about it every year, that we're remembering what the goal was on day one.
Right.
And I think if we work that into the metrics that we're making, we'll probably remember to look at it. Like,
For sure, no, I like that.
How much utilization, like getting higher utilization should be a positive metric. But yeah, I think it's great. I think it's great that I was wrong and that we actually do get quite a bit of usage at these rates. So yeah, I like it.
Awesome. Okay, so next, I'll quickly go over some regional partnership updates with TransLink. So I know Tyler had asked me last week just to look into bus ridership data, to which I have, and TransLink is initiating their retrieval process. I believe it takes some time. So at this time, we still don't have the info, but I'm hopeful I'll receive the files in the next couple of days. I also coincidentally received an email from TransLink's transit demand management team today about a feedback meeting for November. So I'm going to inquire further about the permanent real-time transit tracking capability service for Bowen, because I believe that had been an initial request, or BIMTAC had asked about that with regards to the pilot program. I read that somewhere.
Yeah, I think that's been a long standing since before I started asking for tracking on the buses. Like before that temporary
The pilot.
on-demand pilot.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. And yeah, I guess Tyler, any thoughts on that? Like, did you want to speak to the bus ridership data request or anything?
Well, I'm trying to do Jody's email justice, and if we do have peak demand, I want us to be advocating for improved service. Like if there's enough demand on the weekends to justify more runs, like even if it's only in the summer to handle the tourism problem, I think that's a worthwhile cause. So if me being there is helpful, I can try. Try and make it work.
Okay, I'll update everyone once I get the data, and then ideally, I don't know how they're planning on sharing the data or what kind of file it'll come into, but if I have time, I'll put it in some kind of graphic to make it easier to digest. So.
I like numbers too. You can just send me numbers.
Okay, that's fine. Right. Okay. So the last item on the agenda. So this pertains to the 2023 work plan. I'm thinking it might be best to hold off on this item since it would be beneficial to have feedback from all committee members. But I'm also happy to move it forward with folks if they just want kind of like a preliminary discussion on the 2023 work plan. But
I guess so. The gray is working.
So the gray is essentially because we didn't have like a formalized 2022 work plan. There were items specifically for 2022 that aren't in 2023. So I thought it would be a good idea just to carry over those items in gray for the 2023 work plan to ensure that we're not missing them.
So
I want to share the screen. So
oh yeah, I'm just
no,
looking at the file myself.
Or do you want me to?
I can.
Yeah. Where are you in this?
Page 3 of 5 on the BIMTAC report.
It's
Yeah,
not
I'm
in the
just-
public agenda, so if we could show it.
Oh, that's a good point. That's a good point, Steph. Yeah.
All right.
There we go.
You see that?
Yep.
Great. So yeah, the items in gray. So essentially and then I'll come back to this, but the timeline I'm using is the one in the transportation plan. And so I looked at the items specifically that were in 2022 and not in 2023. And I've put them up here in gray because, we can have this discussion. Maybe we've addressed some of these items, but just from looking over, I don't think we have. And so I feel more comfortable bringing them over into the 2023 work plan.
It's funny, like thinking back to alternative ferries.
Yeah.
I don't remember what the context of that was on the previous plan, whether that was an environmental alternative ferries or a passenger convenience alternative ferries.
Like an electric ferry.
I think it was electric. Yeah, it was more from.
Yeah. So I mean, later on the schedule, Steph, can I mess with the agenda? Can I just move the
Yes,
new
you
item?
may.
Yeah. So the thing I wanted to talk about is I'd love for us to work in future planning of transportation to and from the island, like even if it's a wish list that we're advocating for, into our plan. So alternative ferries, like I think it's too immature for us to talk about it at BIMTAC, and I'm hoping we're going to have somebody from Green Line Ferries come and talk to us in the next few months. But like there's like somebody with a lot of the information that David's been looking for, advocating for this, and has gone to great lengths of personal risk and sacrifice to try and get passenger ferries going. So there is a way there probably will be ways we can support that initiative non-commercially. But one of the things that came out of the BC Ferries meeting was nobody, like they didn't even know, the province representative in BC Ferries, that we don't have a place to land a barge on the island. And that just cued to me that we're not communicating to commercial providers that they could service the island. And I saw a company land, or I saw them leaving, but they had a barge full of concrete trucks, and it looked like they brought them into Tunstall Bay. Does anybody know anything?
Yeah, I was there. I saw it.
Yeah, so I've been meaning to reach out and find out who the company was and get feedback as to how that all happened.
That was the wastewater treatment plant concrete. Shandos was the firm that organized everything. I'm not sure who they used for concrete sub, but that seemed to work fairly well, as long as you have the right tides.
Yeah, so I thought that as an island, if we want to advocate for easing ferry traffic, one easy thing to try and work into long-term plans is to have a place on the island where a commercial barge can land with heavy equipment. And so when you have a paving day, if it's viable for a company to bring over the paving asphalt on a barge and take that unwieldy commercial traffic off the ferry, like that's a huge win for Bowen. But I don't think it's on the radar of anybody right now. And the same would be for terminals that could be used for passenger ferries. Like, what are the areas on the island that you could build a passenger ferry? Like, not necessarily something that Bowen can go and build and wait for the service to come, but just having that all laid out, like this is what exists, this is how it works, this is the land where you could do it, with that, whatever that means, like zoning or ownership, or having that kind of information available, so that when somebody's trying to come up with some other way of doing things, we're supporting their entrepreneurship with information. So I don't know, I'd like to see that as part of the long-term plan.
Yeah, so some kind of feasibility study to support like economic development.
Yeah, I think it could be quite minimalist to begin with, like even a state of the union, like this is where we have looked at having a passenger terminal, like down by the golf course or wherever that was. This is where the barge ramp is on Bowen. This is the challenges with using it. Here's this is what the ramp looks like. Here's a survey, and this is all like a picture of all the recreational boats you have to deal with, and swimmers, and
there's
I don't know, just
that might be better than others. I think Tunstall, when I was there when it happened, I thought, whoa, this is dangerous, really dangerous.
Yeah, I don't know. I think
people, and there's boats everywhere coming and going. Like there would be better places, I think, that aren't maybe as busy in the summertime.
Yeah, there may be better places from a swimmer's perspective, but as far as existing facilities on Bowen that could alleviate some of our other problems, there may not be. But I think that it would serve Bowen to discuss these things openly. Like,
I totally agree.
Like, is this something that Bowen people would support to alleviate, paving disaster ferries for a week, like we're probably about to have next week.
I think if it was expressed that way, like we're trying to get these things off the ferry, and this is a way of getting them off the ferry, and do a study to see where the best places would be.
And also, if you have that information out there, sorry, am I cutting you off?
I'm just talking about infrastructure, like putting infrastructure in.
Yeah, I think that like when it comes to being a commercial entity and trying to figure out how to do something, they don't have infinite time to go and engage the public. Like they don't have money or time to do that. So if that package of information is sitting there and they can go and search, barging to Bowen, and there's, here's what exists. This is the state it's in. This is all the stuff you need to do to make it safe. Like you need to warn the public and have somebody on shore closing the beach for 4 hours, or whatever it is. But if we could package that as part of our information to them and to the public, then for one, more people are going to be able to use it if it makes sense. And two, it'll probably go smoother than if it's just left to the wild, wild west.
I think this is a terrific idea, Tyler. And we've sort of been sitting back for years and years here, and the only alternative is BC Ferries. And having a presentation by Callum Campbell from Green Line Ferries people would say, my goodness, this is incredible. And so it's that sort of creative thinking from someone like that could then spark it internally. But to think this through nicely, it would be a bit of a task, because there's a bunch of information that needs to be gathered, and regulations and all sorts of stuff. But I think this is really valuable to discuss. I don't know exactly. We need to spend a bit of money on coming up with something like this, I think, because you'd need to hire someone to do a bit of work, I think. Unless you
I think you might be overcomplicating it slightly.
Yeah.
I mean, people land a barge where you can land a barge. You've got a boat ramp if their equipment fits. There's not a whole lot. If they don't touch the bottom, I'm not aware of a whole lot of rules and regulations. If they were to land something on the bottom, then there'd be environmental.
Is there eelgrass there? And
Yes.
you get into so many different interest groups, people with different positions on stuff.
Yeah, but I think they would be the ones who need to do that work. So if there is an environmental assessment needed, if Bowen's not ready to pay for that, I think there's still value in saying, this is what was done in the past. There is no environmental assessment currently. There is no anything, but this is what was done 20 years ago, and the land titles are still, like, just stating what we know, I think clears the water for other people to take it forward if it makes sense for them.
Great idea. Thanks, Tyler.
Yeah, I like that. Sorry, I'll put my screen back up if you need.
And then service to regional destinations kind of ties into, I think that was a provincial initiative, or there was like a How Sound Partnerships initiative where they were trying to, I think this may have been an offshoot of that provincial government push to make connections through coastal communities.
The Sea to Sky corridor. Okay.
Yeah. So I think there was a lot of talk about it, but it was all very, like, they were big asks. I mean, we can't even get a connection to downtown Vancouver. So to start dreaming about hopping to Sunshine Coast and whatnot, I think always seemed a bit far-fetched based on the current state. A transit service area expansion, I'm assuming that's like service to the golf course for the buses. Is that probably
would be
where the bus doesn't currently go?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the whole South Bowen, isn't served. So
Town Point Road.
So I think that's definitely worth leaving on the plan.
Right.
Yeah.
And then Horseshoe Bay accessibility, I imagine, and I don't have any recollection of this line item, but there was a bit of a miss when the roundabout and terminal went in as far as the wheelchair ramps working, if that's, if I remember correctly. So I know personally myself, I've been trying to make an effort to have accessibility as a line item or an agenda item on everything we talk about, because it's not our natural perspective, or not mine, and not anyone who's necessarily able-bodied is thinking adequately about the needs of people who have different challenges. So not only do I think we should keep it going, but I think we should expand it to make sure it's like it's a general like consideration of accessibility in all plans. So I think, yeah, they all deserve to be there.
Great.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. That's good, Tyler.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for that feedback. And that ends my update. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Patrick, do we still have you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
can.
Okay, so a bit of an update on the different phases of the multi-use path. So we should finally have our curb and then paving of Trunk Road and the section from Cardina to Miller done, starting tomorrow with the concrete. So hopefully by the end of October. The next piece that was it February that we talked about that? It was quite a while ago. The piece past Artisan, we looked at a number of different alignments. There was some general preference expressed for following along the south side of the Terminal Creek Ravine, and then Connolly Creek and joining the water treatment plant road. The current council confirmed that preference. There was some update put in the undercurrent and our website. Some of the Charlie's Lane property owners who have since met with were quite upset about that. That they saying they hadn't been, but it clearly wasn't enough, and there's a lot more discussions with property owners that's going to be needed. One of the property owners is not. It would be a slog to work through all the issues with them if they're not, very supportive to begin with. There was some relevant points brought up that we really need to consider, particularly around environmental impacts. The section past Artisan, where you're able to maintain still a significant buffer from Terminal Creek, isn't as big of an issue, I don't think, as along Connolly Creek, where there really is no space. Like there's no getting around that. You're building a 3-meter paved pathway right next to the creek, and you'd have to carve into the south bank of that creek and probably construct some retaining structures in places. And the other point that they brought up is the safety issue of Charlie's Lane itself, which is very steep on both sides of the bridge. And having, however, the crossing of the multi-use path looks there, in bad weather, it's apparently difficult to sometimes control vehicles coming down, from Grafton or from the resident side. So essentially creating a safety hazard. They also pointed out, one of the residents said, well, you really should be using the Mid-Island Trail. there's already a road there. We didn't have that on the map. It wasn't a alternative we considered. So I did follow up on that. It's further. It's about half a kilometer more than the preferred route that we talked about, and it's a lot steep. There's parts that are a lot steeper. So we're pushing forward with getting a application together to submit for BC Active Transportation Grant for the first piece of the next phase, which would be up to Charlie's Lane. It doesn't really make great sense as a next piece of trail until you get to Grafton Lake, but it's a $3 to $4 million project is more than we're able to take on in one chunk. These BC Active Transportation grants are going to be recurring annually, and they can fund up to $500,000, and I think it's 70% cost share. But you're competing, they're competitive grants, and you're competing against municipalities that have that have much further advanced design and cost estimates. So it's a bit of a scramble to try and keep the momentum going and get get the funding needed to advance the next part. And the properties aspect is going to be is going to require a lot of time and effort. And if we push, this is going to have to be reconfirmed by the new council. If we're pushing through with our preferred, what we identified as essentially the best route for the users, there's going to be a lot of work that needs to be done. And we're probably going to, not have everybody's agreement, and in terms of the neighbors and the residents. So we're going to take a closer look also at the option where, you come back up to Grafton Road at Charlie's Lane, and we'll have that discussion with the new council. But if things go well, we should be, able to, and we get some grant funding, we should be able to advance the trail past Artisan. We also need to develop more of a network plan than we have in the transportation plan currently. There's other multi-use path and bike and pedestrian route needs identified, but and we actually do have some funding to assist with this, to fund 50% of work on a network plan, which I've been talking to Natasha about how we can advance that in the next few months and try and take advantage of that available funding. So that's a general update of where we're at. I appreciate your thoughts, or if you have any questions.
I've been thinking about this one a fair bit, and I guess I'm coming back to one of the thoughts I had originally, that having an uninterrupted network would be better than no network, and that there are segments further down the road that dollar per kilometer are probably going to do better, be less controversial. And I think there's actually an increased need for it because of the e-bike traffic and the massive, so far fairly more positive than I expected, but interaction between e-bikes and vehicles have changed while we've had this conversation drastically, to the point where in the summer you've got stretches of 20 e-bikes, it feels like, that might be an exaggeration, all spread out at the worst possible interval for passing the whole way across the road. So I feel like now even more so, there is value in having segments of multi-use path that would allow some of that tension to be alleviated, like to give people areas where they can pass instead of being stuck behind those large groups for the entire crossing. So I think that's my opinion there is hardening, that I think we should be pursuing chunks of path where it's easy, opposed to pushing through the hard part first.
I'd like to speak to this. That's really interesting, Tyler. I absolutely agree that the e-bikes have changed things. For one thing, we've got so many of them, and it changes the ability to ride on Bowen. So a whole lot more people are doing it, and they're also, you could pass a slow bike more easily than an e-bike in some ways, because the e-bike is going at a pretty good speed, and you have to have a pretty good amount of space to be able to pass them. Whereas with a slow bike, you know, it may well be easier sometimes to pass them. But anyway, there's so many more now that this really is an issue, and it's becoming an irritant for cars. And it provides more and more reasons for, getting this path done. I get Tyler's point about $ per kilometer or whatever, but I'm also, the discussion we had about this back in whenever it was, the spring, and Tyler, you were the one who pointed out how it would be great for families all over the island to be able to have a bike ride that would go from the Cove up to Grafton Lake, because that's not just for commuters, it's not just for bike riders, it's for families all over the island to be able to do a really interesting trip. So I get your point about $ per kilometer, but I also get your earlier point about how valuable it would be to be able to have that access to Grafton Lake. It would be such a fantastic ride and walk or whatever. So,
I agree, but I guess that we're talking about the multi-use path, and I feel like the Grafton Lake thing is almost different. Like it's adding value in a way that I fully support, but when it comes to strictly speaking, like giving the island cycling infrastructure that allows bikes and cars to coexist, like that's not strictly the same as the Grafton experience would be. Like to me, Killarney Lake and the fact that you can walk from the Cove to Killarney Lake, around it and back, is one of the most valuable, if not the single most valuable bit of outdoor recreational space we have on the island. And I think it would be foolish to not try and pursue a second version of that, like another place families can go that's not the same walk.
Yeah.
But I don't want to see the multi-use path die in a burning effigy of Facebook hatred for spending, because we're pushing the expensive section first, because we have this vision of something fantastic which should happen when there's easy wins with like a $500,000 grant that could get a big chunk and solve a perfectly relevant transportation issue. So I support them both, but
I support them both too.
but I think that the multi-use path should probably have a $ per kilometer and greater good for transportation element to it.
Yeah, we did talk about that with council too, about the relative value of continuing where you left off and pushing westward versus trying to find other places that are important, closer to further west. The other, there's pros and cons to both approaches. The preference with council was for overall pushing forward with the path past Artisan. The other advantage there is, if you connect to Grafton Lake, and then it would be similar time frame that the second phase of the Grafton Lake lands development would be occurring, and that next piece to Harding Road would be, added on about the same time. But yeah, we'll have to have that discussion again with the new council, and we'll discuss the options. The other aspect from the point of view of this year's grant is that we haven't done any preliminary work or design work for any other sections. So in terms of pulling something together to try and take advantage of this year's funding, that was another factor to consider. We're able to do that for the Grafton Lake piece.
I'm going to add one more thought here, and it's just like I was saying, use the park to push for better transportation service on and off the island. Use it for this as well. Metro Vancouver knows and knows that this is necessary for the park, and they're talking about the park as a place where you can get there by bicycle. And they don't want to have a whole lot of car traffic, and this is part of their plan from a climate change and an equity, personal equity perspective. So I use that also. I would recommend using it as a pressure point. Okay, we need to get funding for this. I've mentioned it to our MP. I would just try pulling more strings and figuring out more ways to get bags of money to get the whole thing done by the time the park is opened.
Maybe get some money from them.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I mean, they should, if they say there's going to be a bike path across the island to a new park.
Yeah.
They should be paying for part of it anyway.
Yeah.
Well, and they
cost.
They want they need a rezoning, and that's sort of a point of leverage, in terms of how we strategically bring that forward. That's bigger discussion, but yeah, there's opportunity there for sure.
Yeah, but on the positive note, I'm super excited to see that section get paved.
Yeah.
At least that's one less scary area coming off the ferry.
What? I agree with you about the two uses of that area, like the family versus the cyclist getting home from work. But getting the priority, get those bikes off the road. You got to get them off the road, because you're right. They are, I mean, I'm a cyclist and a car driver, and I've experienced both sides of it. And we have to get the bikes off the road.
Yeah, get the traffic separated. Yeah.
Well, this has been a real interesting change, because I have never felt safer in whatever it's been, 25 years of riding a bike, than I do now with all the chaos the e-bikes are causing. It has made drivers so much more patient for me as an avid cyclist.
Yeah.
They just treat me like I am the nicest thing they've dealt with, compared to what it was like 3 years ago. It's like a person riding close to the edge, predictably, at a decent clip. They've been fantastic lately.
I still have seen incredibly dangerous situations where somebody can get killed.
Oh, for sure. But compared to what it was like 4 years ago on Island.
Even now I've seen it. So yeah, maybe you and I have had different experiences, but my feeling is wherever that path goes, just get the bikes off the road.
Yeah, I think that the rental aspect,
everybody's going to be happier.
Adds a whole new challenge to cars and bikes interacting.
Yeah.
But thanks for the update, Patrick.
Thanks, Patrick.
Yeah, thank you.
The next one I've got is the business arising from the minutes, and Jody, Tourism Bowen's email was to Illy originally. Should I share it, or Steph? What's easiest here? Am I sharing?
Yeah.
Okay. I thought we would just maybe go over a few of these. She's got it beautifully organized into point by point. The first one was ferry overloads and ferry marshaling. I feel like we kind of covered this through it, the FAC stuff. So that one is kind of in the works. The ferry lane and parking and yellow hatching, I believe this one was just for improved signage or possibly repainting. And then the return ferry ticket, I'm hoping we can cover this with the BC Ferries information slip. But I won't claim victory until that actually happens.
You know, when they sell you the ticket at the ticket booth, those girls or those guys could also just say, this is a two-way ticket.
Yeah,
Simple.
I've actually noticed them. I mean, it says it in the sign when you're approaching.
A lot of people don't read.
I know, but I think one of the issues with asking BC Ferries to do things is they're going to potentially do it, but if it doesn't work, we've just used one of our initiatives.
Mhm.
So it may seem like a small ask to say, okay, could you get them to do this? But by the time they agree to it, implement it, and we see if it works, it's actually quite a long and volunteer time intensive process. And then if it doesn't work, like one of the initiatives was to get them to put the sign up, like, oh, put it on the sign, maybe people will read that. And it hasn't solved the problem. So I guess I'm hesitant to just do small asks for very similar things. Like we've already got it on the billboard above the ticket booth, to now ask them to say it to every single person all day for 3 months seems, in my personal opinion, just not worth the ask. Whereas if we actually have something that they can just include with the ticket that could get a bunch of these things covered, I feel like that's where the energy should go. What are your thoughts there?
I don't know. If you're getting trained to sell tickets at the ticket booth, to say this is a two-way ticket, it just doesn't seem to be like a big deal to me.
Yeah, it's not, but I mean, today
Training process.
I got to use the HOV boarding initiative that they've got right now. I had 4 people in the car. So the number of things they actually did to accommodate that request from Bowen for a measure for the refit was actually quite large. Like the ferry became full. They then had to shut down sales. So sales were held. Then their staff had to get out of one booth, open up another booth, unlock the gates, move the cones, and this is all in a few minutes, get set up, and then you could see the person working at the booth going back and forth between the two. She had to move across the student signature board and some other box, maybe a cash box or something. Like there's quite a bit of things they did. And then they sent up an employee to walk the line and check cars for that were already in the queue for high occupancy vehicles and pull them out and send them down the line. So there's something they've done for us, which is actually, I think that one was their idea as a way to get people like fewer cars during the refit. But there's actually a huge amount of instruction and coordination for them to pull off in a couple of minutes. So I think to just say it's just training for somebody selling tickets is a little bit dismissive of all the things they may do that we don't know anything about.
Can I speak?
Yeah.
Why don't I dig up that? I've been doing a bit of digging, but I'll go offline and dig up the flyer. It's old. It would need to be quite updated with our new branding.
Yeah.
And maybe when you can take a look at that and see if we can big up bold the return piece. So just take a look at it and see if it's helpful.
Sure.
For taking next steps.
But I mean, I can send it to FAC to ask again for more instruction.
Mhm.
Tyler, that's amazing that they did all that with the high occupancy cars. Kind of astonishing.
Well, you know, David, we were coming down the hill and it said possible wait, and we were just about to pull off and go out the Flagger side exit and go down to park and walk on. And I was like, well, they said they were going to do this. Let's just try it once and see what happens. We have 4 people in the car. We are like 40 cars up the hill and it already says possible wait. Let's see if there's any way they get us on here, because as the FAC person, I should probably try it out and complain if it doesn't work. And I was sitting there a little nervous until the last minute when they actually pulled it all off. I was like, oh, that was pretty good. I was positively surprised, because there's only 2 cars. Like, they did all that work and only found 2 cars in the whole line that had 4 people in it.
Wow.
So 1, Bowen's not taking advantage of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And 2, that was a
know.
fair commitment.
Do commuters know about this initiative?
I'm sure they probably all read the things that are available during the refit, and it's on there. I mean, I don't know how I could broadcast it anymore. I've gone on Facebook, it's in the minutes, it's on their website, it's on the service notice.
Right.
I feel pretty confident to say we tried.
Yeah.
But I think I'll skip to the next one, just in this spirit of time. Local community shuttle buses. I think this comes back to our requesting service data. So I think we can skip over that one, just avoiding the weekend conflict with tourism and locals and full buses. Extended bus service. I think we talked about that on the community plan. Sharing the road respectfully. This is a comment that also mentions the increase of electric bikes and our narrow to no shoulder roads. I don't know how I feel about advocacy telling people to share the road. Like, I don't know that that works. I'd be interested to see if Hub or some organization who spent more time thinking about this than me thinks that this works, that you can actually just say, hey, people, share the road with bicycles. I don't know, it hasn't, the share the road signs have been up for 30 years or something.
They don't make any difference.
So
No,
I don't know.
make any difference.
The only people I think they make difference to is cyclists, because we know what it's like. So we're very polite and patient with cyclists. But if you're not a cyclist, I don't think you have that perspective. So
yeah, I don't know. I don't have a suggestion.
No.
We tried with the ride to school week with Illy,
yeah,
and it was kind of scary how that story came back. So I think trying it again with the RCMP is worthwhile, but I don't know how much more I would suggest. But the parking in Snug Cove, that one is kind of interesting. We've lost a lot of parking. Has staff had any feedback? Or I think we may have lost Natasha.
No,
Or she's just
still
not on
here.
my screen.
I'm still here. I don't have any particular feedback on that, but I'm happy to follow up with bylaw services. I think they would probably be the appropriate staff to connect with. So
Yeah, I'm just curious because it's noticeable living here. Like, even our community events are kind of strange now. There's no large parking lots, so the parade, Remembrance Day, like anytime the community is encouraged to all come to the Cove, it's just like wild west of parking everywhere, and it really highlights how little is available.
right.
So I think that's an interesting one that maybe we should also, I don't know if it's on our long-term plan to to think about future parking needs. I mean, one thing that BC Ferries is not thinking of at all is their staging needs, like whether that's ever going to change. It's absolutely not on their radar. So parking in the cove for temporary and ferry, like ferry traffic and other uses, should probably be an ongoing discussion in the planning.
Yeah, so pay parking, yeah, so parking it'll be within the 2023 work plan. So we can address that, particularly looking at the cove as well.
Okay. I think, Steph, maybe I could like summarize these into action items or something that we could carry forward in the meetings until we have answers to them, or at least with updates that we can send back, because she took the time to provide a lot of valuable feedback. So I'd like to make sure we don't drop it.
That sounds great. Thank you, Tyler.
Oh, there was another one. Yeah, I knew my memory remembered painting. The follow-up email was just suggesting that the painting in the hatched areas include a no parking. If there's no real additional cost to that, the next time we're painting the hatches, I'm all for it. But I don't know. I think the information leaflet included with the ferry tickets probably more likely to help. But I have no idea.
Yeah, I agree, Tyler. If it's easy to do, I mean, just be a stencil that we have made, and then you can spray it on.
I think it's worth a try, but I think people just these days, I mean, the attitudes I see are just like, well, I'm going to do what I want. I don't care if it's yellow hatch.
Yeah, I think some of it might be attitude, but it's a pretty confusing experience. Like if you're not from Bowen, or if you have a guest come and you're trying to tell them where they can park, you can imagine somebody who's just come to the island for the day, and they may not be coming from Tunstall Bay. They may, be finishing lunch somewhere in the cove, and they're trying to figure out how to get into the parking for the ferry lineup. And then they may drive around and see that not only is the ferry totally overloaded, but there's not even a place to park anymore. And you can see some strange decisions being made at that point.
Yeah, well, maybe they won't come back again.
I bet you that's a common occurrence after some of the summer ferry conditions we've had.
Right.
Tyler, I just want to point out your screen sharing the agenda.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I was just coming back up because I thought I was heading towards
Don't want any accidental sharing.
Well, let's see what we got on here. No, I think we're safe. Yeah, so I think that is good. I want to move the transportation recommendations to action items until we've got answers. The new business, item 6.1, I think we've already covered when we talked about the plan. And then, as always, we have information items, the island plan and the transportation plan. And then we also have next meeting and adjournment, but are we going to plan? What is the plan for next meetings on committees?
With a date, didn't we? But we don't. Remember, Natasha, did we talk about it? Was it you?
I think we briefly talked about trying to move forward with scheduling set dates, but I don't know if anything came to
I think we
fruition
were
or if
thinking
it
like
was
December,
finalized.
Tuesday, December 6th might be like a nice kind of 6 weeks from now. Give people time, but it's still before council orientation and still before strategic planning and after David's.
And are we going to continue to Zoom, or will we start meeting in person again?
Would you like to start meeting in person?
I prefer it.
Okay, we are with committee, council as a smaller group have been fairly unanimous on that. The 130 committee members that I have are all over the map, so we haven't made much of a transition.
Okay.
We need to take a proper look at that. I may go group by group. We probably won't have much of Patrick, but he could zoom in. We can do hybrids.
I don't care. That's my preference, but I
Okay.
do it whichever way any people want to do it.
I guess I support whatever is easiest for staff.
I mean, I think from my perspective, I would probably be zooming in because it would be a late evening for me.
Yeah.
She's
That
in
would be-
town.
Yeah, that would be impossible.
And we do recall when Emma used to leave
Remember
early, it
Emma
was terrible. As soon as Emma left, we made really bad decisions.
Oh.
And she always left to catch the 8:30, I think.
Yeah, and then everything would go crazy.
Oh.
Those are the good old days.
But we do have hybrid options. They're a little funny because there's sort of like a lot of people who are small and then one big head or two. But so, I mean, Councillor Hawking can speak more to that. But
It's just a question. I don't.
yeah,
I just wondered.
I like the idea of regular scheduled though, or anything that could make us get quorum once a year would be fantastic. So
once a year.
And I think the more loose we get about everything, it just starts to fall apart.
Yeah, I
People
agree.
stop, and people stop taking attendance seriously. So,
Mm.
yeah, that's my concern, especially too with the Zooming. I think if you don't have to show up somewhere in person, it's a lot easier to back out.
I would have thought that would make it easier for people to attend too, but
It's
I
not been
don't
my
know.
experience for other committees, not to be argumentative.
no, I love argumentative.
It's not been my experience with other committees. I think this has been a funny transition, this group with COVID and no transportation and then reactivating and yeah. How
Yeah,
about December 6th? It's a Tuesday at 7 p.m.
Sure.
Sure.
Yep, that works for me.
Is
And David will come as a member of the public.
I would have to be appointed. I would have to apply and then be appointed.
And maybe
Yes, he's applying.
are they busy trying to recruit people to it, for these different committees? Because we could probably
We're not busily doing that. The reason, two things. One, there's a committee's review going on that was sort of close to a landing, and then of course we've the two people spearheading were Councillor Kale and Nicholson, who are no longer with us.
well,
So the annual expiration date is November 5th. So I did do a reappointment report for closed council next week. But there was internal discussions. We thought not to do a recruiting campaign with this council because it's council who's appointing. So we'll let the new councillors decide who they want.
well, come back, David. We need you.
Yes.
Well, it'll be up to the new council. So
Ooh, that would
Think
be
my-
exciting.
my patience for this not getting quorum is not infinite.
you know
I know.
it's
Don't
ridiculous.
threaten me. Don't threaten me.
No.
This has been a great meeting, and we can also change the terms of reference as well. Make it a smaller group.
Yeah, I guess that was going to be my next question is, would it be easier to get quorum if we allow the people who don't seem to really want to be here to not be here?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know, this is literally like how many meetings have we had in 2 years
I
that
know.
made quorum? Like 2?
Yeah, it's really not good. No.
So anything we can do to improve that, I'm for. You can boot me
Okay.
out if you need to.
No, you've done a great job, Tyler. Thanks.
Well, with that threat in mind, I'm now nervous about this December 6th because I can't really do any active recruiting until January. So maybe we should wait until, so council's doing a strategic planning on December 7th, they're doing an orientation session on December 9th.
Yeah, I mean, I'm also happy to, like, if we're not getting quorum, I'm happy to answer emails or have a call or a working group or whatever we need to
Okay.
cover on December 6th, just so that we can continue doing the things we want to do, if that helps.
Okay, so we'll pencil in December 6th with no expectations of an excellent legally constituted meeting in light of the council transition
Sure.
and other issues. Okay,
Okay.
managing expectations.
Yeah.
Good. It's important.
So I think we can adjourn at 8:44.
Thank
Okay,
you so much.
thank you.
Thanks, Tyler.
Awesome.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers.
Bye,
Bye.
thanks.